Alright, so in this video, I'm going to be discussing my top 12 college football teams that right now I would be considering rebuilding in NCAA 25 that will be coming out in July. These are just 12 teams that are kind of obscure. I don't hear many people talking about them. That's normally what I tend to go for when it comes to dynasty rebuilds, things like that. Obviously, all of these teams recently have not had very much success. There's a decent mixture of group of 5/Power 5 teams in this 12-team list. Beginning with number 12, it is Wyoming. Now, Wyoming is kind of a cliche. It feels like because they're so obscure, a lot of people are going to be wanting to do rebuilds on them, getting them to the number one team in the country. It would be cool, possibly getting them to join. I mean, Wyoming could be in the Big Ten based on how we've seen realignment with all the four West Coast teams joining the conference. Imagine Wyoming in the SEC facing Alabama. Yeah, Wyoming would be a fun team just because they're so obscure. Kind of a hard place to recruit, but it is a video game, so as long as you got them to be, a prestigious program, I'm sure you'd be able to land some 5 stars. They do have Josh Allen. I mean, he did go there, so also you'd get great snow games, and they've got good colors. Another big thing when it comes to teams that I choose, the colors are very important because you're going to be looking at the team colors so much in terms of just the logo during recruiting on your homepage. Normally the team colors are there. The stadium's very important. I'm hoping we can maybe be able to build a new stadium for some of these teams. Imagine you made Wyoming a powerhouse and you built a massive super stadium of 100,000 seats. That's the type of stuff I want to see implemented into this new game, but they would be at number 12. At number 11, it is Temple. Now, the only way I would use Temple is if you could build a new stadium, because playing Temple football games at Lincoln Financial Field, their home field, it's just terrible. It's an NFL stadium, but Temple is pretty obscure. Nobody talks about them. They've been terrible recently, and they're a team I might be interested in doing a little rebuild on. Temple football. Moving on to number 10, it is Syracuse. So obviously everybody knows Syracuse out of the ACC, the only team in college football, or in Power 5 to play in a dome. The JMA Wireless Dome. I think it'd be a kind of a cool thing to rebuild them and turn them into a powerhouse and kind of utilize the dome in terms of recruiting to your advantage. You don't have to worry about the weather, anything like that. The ACC is getting more and more watered down. Maybe FSU leaves, it becomes easier to potentially win that conference in game, and Syracuse is normally never good at football, so that would just be a cool kind of obscure team to go on a dynasty run with, get them to be the number one overall team in the country. Moving on to number 9, it is UNLV. So there's another team. Unfortunately, they play at Allegiant Stadium. I think it would be kind of cool, though. I wonder how realistic they will make the Allegiant Stadium attendance. This is actually something that's very critical to the game. Preferably, they make the entire upper deck empty. And then if you go on a run to where, you enter the top 25, maybe they open up the upper deck a little bit. Some people start showing up, and then it gets to the point where Allegiant Stadium, which is the same stadium that hosted the Super Bowl, imagine it sells out and UNLV joins the Big Ten. I mean, that's the Las Vegas market. If UNLV football gets really good, you could get good in recruiting. I just think they're kind of an obscure team, and they've got a stadium that's pretty crazy. Imagine selling it out when you're the number one team in the country at home facing Ohio State or facing Michigan. It would just be cool. Moving on to the number 8 team, it is Stanford. So we know Stanford was really good with McCaffrey. They had their run with Jim Harbaugh, David Shaw, but recently they've fallen on hard times. I think it would set up, if you did a dynasty with Stanford, some really exotic matchups. With them joining the ACC, you're going to be going to Syracuse. You're going to be going to North Carolina. Just weird games. FSU possibly coming to Palo Alto. And rebuilding a team like Stanford, they've got such a clean stadium, clean look. It would be a cool team to rebuild there. Moving out to number 7, it is East Carolina. Yeah, imagine the mod where you can change the field color to purple. Oh, or yellow with this team. That would actually be very hard to look at. But yeah, East Carolina's got some really cool colors. The reason I would rebuild them, they're just completely obscure. It would just be so random to get this team to the ACC or to the SEC or whatever conference you could get them to. and possibly the number one team in the nation. It would be pretty sweet. Or you could just keep them in their conference and just keep getting into the 12-team playoff that way, because there is an auto bid. Moving on to the number 6 team, it is Virginia Tech. So this is a pretty serious, another ACC Power 5 team that has not been good recently. They did go on a big run where they would always make a bowl game, but even that, they were kind of average. They've got a great pedigree with their stadium, Lane Stadium, with how loud it gets. This would just be a fun team to rebuild. It's not really based on it being random. It's just a team that's been down that does have a good football prestige, and they would be cool to rebuild. Moving on to number 5, it is San Jose State, the Spartans. I envision building an ultra elite defense. San Jose State, though, the recent stadium renovation that they got, it's the weirdest thing imaginable. I did a video, I believe right after week 0, because San Jose State played a home game on week 0. If you look behind their one sideline, there is no seating. Imagine being the number 1 team in the country and that's your stadium. How hilarious would that be? And they've got really cool colors as well, the Spartans. I just love, it's kind of like a beachy vibe. It's just a very good vibes for San Jose State. So they'd be a fun, obscure team to rebuild. Moving on to number 4, another ACC team. It is Wake Forest. I just love their colors. They have a really crappy stadium, but in general, Wake Forest has been really bad. Wake Forest used to have a good basketball program, but in terms of football, it would be cool to rebuild them with their colors, the fact that they haven't been good, and really make them a powerhouse in the ACC. Moving on to number 3, it is Marshall, the Thundering Herd. I love their colors. Marshall, it's just a clean name. Imagine getting a mod where you change the field color to like a really light green. Because we know, grass, it's already going to be green, but imagine dyeing it like really light green for Marshall. I don't know. I just think it'd be cool. And to me, they're just like the quintessential team during an NIL age that could go on a run. You could also put SMU. I forgot to add SMU. They could be another team. Not really a rebuild because they're actually pretty decent, but with them joining the ACC, that's a team that people I'm sure are going to look at. SMU, possibly rebuilding them. Moving on to number 2, it is South Florida. South Florida, great recruiting base, could easily join the SEC if you do go on a run on a 4 or 5 year stretch. They're also getting a brand new stadium. They're at number 2 for me. And then number 1, the team that I'm looking at very closely in terms of possibly making a 20-year mega dynasty. It is the Midshipmen of Navy. I just think when you look at Navy, the reason I chose them over Army or Air Force, I feel like Army always gets talked about when it comes to military schools, and Air Force just had their run this past year, and people are going to be all over Air Force. Guys, I was in on Air Force, the hype, before last year when I predicted them to go undefeated, and they did start 8-0. But it's like Air Force, it's gotten a little bit oversaturated. We've seen them in the news. It's enough. What about Navy? What a clean name. Imagine having the number 1 team in the nation, that number 1 right next to the name Navy on a scoreboard. I can envision it. Navy would be an amazing team to rebuild. Would I change off of the triple option? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You need to recruit a 5-star running back and a dual threat running QB. That's the whole point to bring into the system. You don't change the system. Imagine a triple option team being the number 1 team and building a dynasty. It would be amazing. Navy for me is number 1 in teams. They're just very obscure. Again, nobody talks about them. If you want to rebuild a school like that, everyone either goes to Army or Air Force. Nobody really talks about Navy. So that's why they're number 1 for me. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.